Hey viewers, my name's Cara. I'm your host for Tuesdays on the Pagan Perspective, and this week we're talking about organizing your information for your Book of Shadows. This topic is about putting together a Book of Shadows, but since we have talked about that numerous times, 3 times over the past 6 years, which doesn't sound like a lot when you think about it, but really, it's always been the hosts talking about it, so several of us have talked about it before. You can definitely go back and look at those videos and see what we had to say then. But because we have talked about this subject in the past, I wanted to do a slightly different angle on it, and this time we're focusing on just organizing information that you may already have, instead of just how to begin one. The questioner was saying that they have been researching multiple pantheons for some time now, and now have all of these disparate notes everywhere and are wondering how to put it together. So that's what I'm going to focus on. I have some handwritten bullet points here. So the first idea that I have, and probably what's going to work best for our questioner, since they are in the position of having information about multiple pantheons to deal with, the first way that I would say to organize it, and this is assuming that you have them all as free-floating notes that can be organized into whatever order, such as if you had them in digital copy and you can copy and paste and put it into the order you want, or if you have them all on separate pieces of paper and can put them into a binder and rearrange the order, something like that. The first idea that I have is to organize it by pantheon, seems simple enough, and then have a section that is for common or universal practices, things that aren't necessarily part of any one of those pantheons, or things that can apply to multiple pantheons, or practices that aren't necessarily deity related at all that can then be applied to any one of those cultural frameworks that you've been researching. That's probably going to be the easiest. If this is a case where you have a lot of information about all of the different paths and pantheons and way that they do things, then you may want to have a different notebook or binder or document or whatever the case may be for each one of those pantheons, and then also keep a separate place for those things that are universal among all of them or that don't necessarily fit in with everything else. So that's my first idea. For the rest of you, or for this person if this works out better, but for the rest of you who may not have multiple pantheons worth of research to look at, here are some ideas for you. One thing that you can do to organize is to put everything in ritual order. This would be if you have the knowledge of how a specific path or tradition puts together their ritual. And then you would put together your book with the first thing first. Maybe you would want to put general beliefs and things like that first. And then you would start with things like techniques for cleansing yourself, techniques for cleansing your space. Then you would have a section on the circle casting if that path or tradition has one. Then you'd have a section for invocation and welcoming of the elements, if that's part of this path, or whatever happens next in the ritual. And then invocation of deity, if that's applicable. And then you'd have a section of maybe holiday celebrations or different magical practices that might take place in the middle of a ritual. And then toward the end, you would have your saying goodbye to and releasing. Thank you. Releasing of the elements and deities and thanking them and anyone that you have called, and then opening the circle if you had cast it at the beginning, etc. So you could have information about all those things in the order of how they would be done. There would be a section in there for cakes and ale or communion or libations or whatever you call it, but setting it up in that order so that it sort of makes sense to you as a flow. Another way that you could do it is just in chronological order of how you came across this information. So kind of like a journal. And you would just, anything that you're learning about now, you would be writing as you go, and then the next thing that you learn about would be next, and then if you learn about something similar to what you had learned before, it would still just go next in line because it's all chronological, and then you might say, see previous section on whatever, depending on how organized you like to be. I was big on that, especially in school. I always had pretty good study habits and note-taking habits, so yeah. The next thing is to organize everything alphabetically by subject. So this would be anything that you have information about, put it together into something that you can label with a subject, and then put it all alphabetical. So for example, you would have things about altars first, and then auras, then circle casting, then cleansing, then invocations, so on and so forth. And then you might even want to have a table of contents or an index or something like that if you're really, fancy, organized, like me. And then the next thing on my list was that you could have indexes or bibliography type things. Hello! Grandma's home. I'm making a video. What are you doing? That's okay. We were almost done anyway. Putting indexes or bibliography style things maybe at the back for lists of books, for correspondence charts. No, I'm making my video. For correspondence charts and other things like that. Or you could always order it by what you use most. Put the diagrams and the charts and the correspondences and stuff like that right up front, things that you'll need to reference quickly, and then put more history and things like that further back in the book where you may not need to get to them as frequently. Or things that are for Sabbaths, specific holidays, stuff like that that you only need to get to once a year or so, put those further back. Put the stuff that you need right up front so you never have to dig through. Now the way I do it, I have several books and notebooks and things. Like you're getting the impression, I'm pretty hyper-organized. I want things in different places. I also am the type of person who doesn't want to put anything all together and then never be able to move it. So I do have one book that is bound that I've gotten a lot better at just putting stuff in it. Whatever. And let's just use the book, because it's a nice book. So I have several journal-style books that are just in chronological order. Those are my mirror books. I say books, plural, because I had one that I filled up, so now I'm on to a second one. But it's basically one thing. I call it a mirror book. I know some of you have things that you call mirror books as well, because last time I mentioned it, someone said, oh my gosh, I've never heard anyone else refer to using a mirror book before. It's something that we get from Scott Cunningham's writing. And it's called a mirror book because it's for reflections. Yeah, so it's kind of like a journal, and just any thoughts that I have about my path end up in there. And sometimes when I do readings for myself, I record the readings in there as well. So it's just chronological. And then I have another chronologically kept journal that is a separate book, has a butterfly on it, and it is specifically for any spellcraft or rituals that I do. So when I do something formal that I want to record a spell or something like that to be able to go back to it, that goes in a separate notebook. Sometimes those entries overlap with things in my mirror book, but a lot of the time they're separate. So that one book is significantly thinner because I have a lot more reflections about my path than I do actual workings. So that's that. And then I have one which is the fancy one, that has charts and lists in it. That's what I started putting in it, because I knew correspondence charts I'm just going to need all the time, so I just put them in there. And then I just put in prayers, songs, whatever comes up that I want to put in there that's kind of like a reference. I think of that more as a grimoire, personally. I think of a book of light and shadows as your personal reflections and thoughts about your path and evolutions, and a grimoire as kind of a compendium of all of your resources and knowledge. So not everyone makes that distinction, but to me, I do. So my fancy book, you've probably seen it in the past in my other videos, has a unicorn on the cover. It's kind of a 3D cover. And that one, I just put whatever the next thing is that I want to put in the book, it just goes on the next pages. I'm just trying to use this pretty book and not worry about it being permanently there and never be able to change it. I do have certain pages reserved for like all the stuff that has to do with air, earth, fire, water, spirit. So then I reserved those pages, and then the next things go on the following pages. So I do a little bit of that, but that's what that book is for me. And then I actually have another notebook that is specifically for deity research. When I got to that point in my path where I just wanted to learn about different pantheons, deities, I have another notebook that is blue. That doesn't really matter, but it kind of signifies to me. And that's where I just have all of my research about different deities. And whenever I learn something about a new deity, I go to that notebook and put it in there. So that's how I keep my things separate. Maybe that inspired you, gave you a little idea somewhere in there. I know that's not an extensive list of how to, but hopefully something in there sounded like it might help you, or reminded you of something else that you might be able to do that will suit you best. So enjoy your organizing, and I will see you next time. Until then, don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and goodbye. Say goodbye, Grandma. she said goodbye.